Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's been gaining a lot of attention lately: the American economy and the drastic changes reshaping our society. As someone who has studied the economy for years, I want to explain why these changes are happening and what's driving them. Let's start with a group that's been at the center of recent political discussions: working class Americans. I'm talking about those in the Rust Belt, those who might be labeled as rednecks or hillbillies, and others who have long been overlooked by policymakers and are now facing poverty. In recent elections, both political parties have given unprecedented attention to these Americans. It's become clear that the struggles and frustrations of these people can no longer be ignored by Washington. It's ironic that in a country as wealthy and capitalist as the United States, so many citizens are now living in poverty, to the extent that they could potentially determine the outcome of a presidential election. Some economists are even warning that the U.S. could collapse under the weight of its own greed and speculation. Today, I want to explore why a nation known for its wealth is starting to decay from within. This isn't just a topic for America. It applies to many countries around the world. So let's take a closer look at what's really going on. To understand where we are now, we need to look back at the last 20 years of the American economy. During this period, we've seen increasing income inequality and the rise of speculative capitalism. These changes have fundamentally altered the landscape of American society. As the structure of American industries began to shift, many large corporations started moving their production overseas to cut costs. This led to a shrinking number of jobs in the U.S., most of which were in the service industry or small businesses that lacked the capital to invest in long-term growth. The result was a dramatic decrease in stable, high-paying jobs, and the income of working-class Americans began to stagnate. In the early 2000s, after the dot-com bubble burst and the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. government responded with aggressive interest rate cuts and increased public spending. This laid the groundwork for a housing bubble, as financial institutions began offering home loans to people with poor credit, betting on the rising value of the collateral. This all came to a head during the 2008 global financial crisis, which dealt a severe blow to the working class. They were already struggling with stagnant wages and a lack of good jobs, and within a decade, they faced two major economic crises: the dot-com bust and the subprime mortgage crisis. Economic crises tend to worsen income inequality and asset polarization, and that's exactly what happened. By the end of the 2000s, income inequality had reached unprecedented levels, and the American middle class was hit hard. Instead of addressing the structural problems that led to the crisis, the government and the Federal Reserve chose to flood the market with liquidity, effectively bailing out financial institutions while doing little to reform the system. If there had been serious structural reforms and a major overhaul of the financial sector during the 2008 crisis, things might have turned out differently. But instead, the U.S. chose to avoid the pain of restructuring, leading to the moral hazard and speculative bubbles we see today. This approach has only deepened the extreme polarization of the American economy. Now, the cost of living has skyrocketed to the point where many Americans need to work two jobs just to make ends meet. The American dream, once a symbol of hope and prosperity, is becoming more and more unattainable for the average person. At this point, American politics is in a tight race, with both Democrats and Republicans offering populist policies aimed at winning over the working class. But these policies often avoid the hard work of structural reform, opting instead for short-term solutions that could create even more problems down the road. It's concerning to see the U.S. becoming a symbol of wealth disparity, creating risks for the global economy. The American middle class, once the backbone of the nation, is struggling, and that's something we all need to pay attention to. Thanks for tuning in today.